Hello and thank you for joining me in this Mind Mastery video. Today I'm going to talk about the Sage Archetype, which is all about drawing on our kind of inner wisdom, if you like. The Sage Archetype is often portrayed as a teacher, as a wise old man or a woman, someone who is connected with this realm of intellectual knowledge or simply wisdom, intuitive knowledge as well. In its balanced form, this archetype is all about gathering knowledge and learning and using this knowledge to teach other people, to pass this knowledge on to a younger generation, for example, to influence other people on either on the individual level or on the collective level. In a general sense, the wise old man or the sage archetype is a kind of solitary person because they use the time for introspection, self-reflection. They know that the knowledge itself and the wisdom is not only present through the experiences in the outside world, but most importantly, it's present when we connect with ourselves, when we search for the answers within ourselves. So when we give opportunity to ourselves to look for answers and stay curious and stay present with what is coming to us through, for example, intuitive medium, right? So it's all about kind of withdrawing into ourselves in order to seek the answers, right? It's about giving the space for our unconscious mind to manifest itself, to allow us to kind of draw connections between many different ideas, because that's how the wisdom is developed, when we distance ourselves from our own preconceived opinions, preconceived ideas and judgments and evaluations, and we give ourselves the space to learn, right? To manifest this knowledge from our unconscious mind. And that could happen through many different ways, but usually self-reflection and introspection is this primary means for the sage archetype to learn and to gather the knowledge. So it's all about seeking the truth and living the truth, right? It's all about staying curious, asking the right questions, staying focused, staying interested in many different things in order to keep this flame of knowledge going on, flame of curiosity, flame of exploration that the sage archetype is all about. And the sage archetype can be also described as someone who has some power for transformation, for healing other people even, by using the wisdom and knowledge. So it's kind of all about seeing through many different layers of existence, seeing through many different layers of people, cutting through many different layers that might be, distracting or simply unnecessary and useless in order to reach for this holy grail, which is our wisdom and knowledge and learning. So in practical ways, that could be translated as, seeing through people, getting this insight, this intuitive insight, intellectual insight as well, cognitive insight, however you want to call it, because there are many different manifestations of this knowledge, cutting through it in order to extract this essence, which is called wisdom. Now, the negative manifestation of the sage archetype, it could be triggered when we are not flexible enough, when we are rigid in our thinking, when we go into this extreme of thinking that, we know more than other people, we are superior intellectually, or we simply get fed up with the ignorance that surrounds us, and we start to move into this negative experience of, being cynical, feeling superior to others. And that can often manifest itself as a negative form of a trickster or the fool archetype, where we use our knowledge to manipulate other people, to play tricks on them, to lead them astray, just for the sake of kind of satisfying our drive for creativity, in a sense, or simply coping with this feeling of loneliness, because there are not many people around us that might be on the same intellectual plane of existence as we are. So in order to cope with this feeling, we might flip into this negative form of a trickster archetype in order to poke at the ignorance that other people are kind of immersed in, so that we can also satisfy our drive for feeling kind of intellectually superior to others. So in that state, we might be, very rigid, very inflexible. We might be very critical and judgmental of other people, very sarcastic, cynical, about what is actually true. Or we might even feel like we analyzed absolutely everything there is to analyze. And so we might end up in a place where we feel like everything is meaningless, there's no point, there is nothing that can be sustainable in a sense. There is nothing that really matters. So no matter how much we learn, it doesn't really matter at the end, because either other people don't perceive it or there is not enough application of this knowledge in practice, which kind of leads us to the next possible negative form of the sage archetype, which is kind of going astray into this intellectual plane and not being able to apply our ideas in practice. So kind of, ruminating over different ideas, exploring different paths of knowledge, exploring different ideas, but not really doing anything with these ideas. It just, going completely astray into this intellectual plane and losing connection with what is in front of us. So not being very grounded, not being very present oriented. And paradoxically, that's what closes us from learning, from further learning and gaining new experiences, because we are so far away, so removed from the present moment and practical experience that we kind of don't see what is in front of us, right? So how can we learn if we can't participate in this present moment experience? And lastly, the negative experience of the sage archetype could be where we don't accept ourselves, where we reject certain parts of ourselves because it doesn't fit our idealistic expectations of how we should be. What is the acceptable way of being? What is the acceptable way of going through the world and interacting with other people or engaging in experiences? Because that's the thing with the sage archetype. Like, when you open yourself up to this knowledge, could be intellectual knowledge, could be intuitive knowledge, you will not always find things that you like. So sometimes we might find ourselves in a situation where we feel confronted. Like, we had a certain idea, we had a certain opinion, but we start learning that we've been completely wrong and the truth is something completely different. So if we not open up ourselves enough to this possibility of being wrong, then we might get stuck in this negative form of the sage archetype. So in that state, in this negative state, we might also feel like, confused, not having enough answers, not being able to make sense of what we learn because we are so removed from this present moment experience. And because also we might lose this ability to trust ourselves, to accept ourselves for who we are. And when we start rejecting ourselves, then whatever we learn, whatever we find on this plane of, wisdom and knowledge, we'll not be able to accept it because we don't believe that what we see is the right thing, is the correct thing. So again, we might act in this self-rejective manner where we reject everything that we learn. Even if we stumble upon this so-called holy grail where we learn something very important, extremely important to our development and growth. But if we don't have this confidence and inner security, we're going to reject it. So all this leads us to practical tips on how can we use this balanced form of a sage archetype. How can we tune in to this balanced form of a sage archetype and use it for learning, for development, for helping other people to kind of connect to their wisdom as well. So first of all, as I've mentioned before, we need to be able to stay open-minded towards what we might find on our path of learning, right? So we need to be kind of flexible enough and comfortable with ambivalence, because not always we can get straight answers just like that. Sometimes it's going to take time. There will be periods where you're going to be confused, where you will feel completely in the dark in terms of what is right, what is the answer, what is the question even, right? So kind of staying open-minded, staying patient, waiting for the next thing to come your way, the next learning, the next moment of insight where you suddenly get this answer and everything clears up for you, everything clicks in. So staying open-minded, staying comfortable with ambivalence, not rushing things. That sort of allows the sage archetype to manifest in this more balanced version. And that brings us to accepting ourselves. So having lots of self-acceptance in terms of the possibility that we might not always like what we find, and that we can use many different perspectives to learn, to look at ourselves, to look at our people. So there's not just one single correct perspective that can allow us to gain that wisdom, but the more perspectives we have, the wider our knowledge kind of becomes, our awareness becomes, because we integrate these different perspectives into one coherent understanding. So having self-acceptance allows us to kind of bring in different parts of ourselves and allow them to interact with each other, so we can draw knowledge and wisdom from them. And that kind of leads to having some faith, having confidence, having some security that if we do the right thing, we're going to get the right answers, right? If we open up ourselves to our intuition, learning, intellectual skills, we're going to find the right answers. But we need to be willing to accept the fact that, it might take a long time. So we need to be willing to have some faith in our own conscience, most importantly, and this pattern of sage archetype. The next tip is related to being willing to apply what you learn in practice. So basically, it might be very nice to go into this theoretical realm, explore different ideas, explore different theories, but how do you apply them in practice, right? What's the application of your knowledge and wisdom? How can you use this wisdom to assist you in everyday life? Because if you can't find a way, the practical way, to apply what you know, what you learn, what you think about, in my opinion, it's kind of, in a sense, useless. I mean, it might feel entertaining to, keep yourself in this intellectual realm, but if you can't find a way to apply it in practice, then, what is the point? So I think particularly helpful in that process would be using the ruler archetype, the king or the queen, to apply this knowledge in practice. So how can you organize what you learn? How can you organize your focus, your attention, so that you can draw the most benefits from learning? So instead of going into these different directions of many different ideas and theories, how can you use this energy to focus on what is most important to you? So this kind of includes prioritizing, developing your values, seeing the future, developing kind of a vision for your future, an outcome or simply a goal, so that instead of going into many different directions, you focus on most important things in your life, and you use this knowledge to assist you in, personal growth, organizing your life, living your life to the fullest. And that leads us to the last tip I wanted to talk about, which is to practice staying grounded and centered on a regular basis, so that you can stay in the present moment instead of constantly wandering into this intellectual realm, in which you can simply get lost, right? So staying grounded, practicing, for example, mindfulness meditation, or simply doing exercises, simply going for walks, anything that keeps you in the physical present moment will allow you to kind of align different aspects of learning. So in a sense, aligning your intellectual or mental life with your gut, so intuition, and your heart, so compassion and kindness towards yourself and other people. So when you stay grounded, you kind of create this balance between many different realms of learning and experience. So this is something to keep in mind as well, because it allows this sage archetype to stay balanced, stay grounded, stay practical, right? And kind of acts like a safety mechanism against going astray into this intellectual realm that has absolutely no practical use for everyday life. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you would like to learn more about staying grounded and expanding your awareness and kind of connecting with this more intuitive way of living, be sure to check out my awareness and dissociation workshop. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.